Before you try to master the world, learn to master yourself. And before you attempt to master yourself, learn to understand your emotions. Because a person who does not control their emotions is not living. They are being lived by impulse, habit, and reaction. Emotions are not enemies. They are signals. But when we are unaware of them, they become storms that move us from peace into chaos, from strength into weakness. It is not power to express every feeling. True power is the ability to choose your response despite the feeling. The mind must become like still water. Not because nothing disturbs it, but because it returns to calm after disturbance. To control your emotions does not mean to suppress them. It means to observe, understand, and act from clarity. This is not a skill taught in school, but it is a skill that will shape every moment of your life. Let us begin. To begin learning how to control your emotions, the first shift must happen internally, not externally. It begins with the deep recognition that you are not your emotions. This understanding is not intellectual, it is experiential. Most people live in a way where whatever they feel becomes their identity in that moment. If they feel anger, they say, "I am angry." And everything that follows reflects that identification. If they feel sadness, they wear it as a skin, speak from it, think from it, and act through it. But this creates a fundamental problem, because when you become one with the emotion, you lose perspective. And when you lose perspective, your decisions no longer come from clarity, they come from confusion and often from regret. So the practice begins with space, a space between the one who is feeling and the feeling itself. To feel anger is a human experience, but to believe that you are anger is an illusion, because when the anger passes, what remains? You remain. When sadness lives, what remains? You do. The one who observes is deeper than what is being observed. In the same way clouds pass through the sky, emotions pass through your awareness. And the mistake is believing that the cloud is the sky. But when you begin to see emotions not as your identity, but as temporary visitors, you no longer obey them. You listen to them. You examine them, you understand them, but you do not become them. This is not detachment in a cold sense, it is clarity. It means recognizing that feelings are part of your human system, but they are not the controller of it. They are data. Anger shows where a boundary was crossed. Fear shows where safety feels threatened. Sadness shows where loss has touched you. Emotions give you information. But information is not meant to be your master. It is meant to be your guide. And you are the one who chooses what to do with that guide. But to recognize this, you must practice observing your emotions in real time. When anger arises, instead of acting immediately, say internally, "There is anger here." Already, this separates the awareness from the emotion. When anxiety rises, instead of getting swallowed by it, note silently, "Anxiety is present." In these phrases, you train yourself not to deny the emotion, but to see it as it is. An experience, not an identity. This ability to witness is like sharpening a blade. The more you train it, the cleaner your perception becomes. You begin to catch the emotion before it controls you. You begin to feel the tension in your chest before the outburst. You begin to notice the racing thoughts before the panic. And this awareness gives you space. And space gives you control. Most people live in a loop: stimulus, reaction, regret. Something happens, they feel something and they act. Only later do they reflect. But in emotional mastery, you insert a pause. Stimulus, feeling, awareness, decision. And that single pause changes everything. Because in that pause, you remember that the emotion is energy, and energy can be directed. Fire can burn, but fire can also warm. The same emotion that creates destruction can also be the force that brings change, protects values, or deepens connection if you know how to hold it without being consumed by it. It is also important to understand that recognizing you are not your emotions does not mean rejecting them. Suppression creates its own problems. The goal is not to deny that you feel. The goal is to stop letting the feeling drive your behavior without conscious choice. So the next time a strong emotion arises, do not judge it, do not resist it, simply witness it. Feel the sensation in your body, watch the story forming in your mind, and then breathe. You are the sky, not the storm. The storm will pass, but the sky remains. And the more you embody that awareness, the less you are controlled by passing clouds. And the more you become the steady presence behind them. To train the mind through observation and not suppression is to move from unconscious reactivity into conscious awareness. Most people are taught, directly or indirectly, that strong emotions should be hidden or avoided. When a child cries, they are told to stop. When someone is afraid, they are encouraged to act brave, not to feel deeply. Over time, this builds a habit not of emotional control, but emotional denial. And when you deny what you feel, you are not mastering it. You are burying it. But what is buried is not gone. It remains beneath the surface, growing heavier and more distorted. This is how suppressed emotion becomes a hidden force in the background of your life, influencing how you think, speak, and relate without you realizing it. Observation is different. Observation means allowing the emotion to arise, but not letting it take control. It means you remain present with the feeling, without escaping into distraction or drowning in judgment. This is not weakness. It is strength of the highest kind, because to sit with an emotion, fully aware, without acting on it, without suppressing it, is to gain mastery over your internal world. It is to face the wave without running and without letting it crash over you. Most people believe they are afraid of their emotions, but what they are truly afraid of is feeling powerless in the face of them. And the only way to stop being powerless is to turn and face what you feel completely. When you observe an emotion without judgment, you begin to understand it. You notice how it starts in the body, a tightness in the chest, a flush in the face, a change in the breath. You begin to recognize the thoughts it brings with it, the storylines, the assumptions, the blame, or the fear. And most importantly, you start to see how often those thoughts are repetitive, not new. You realize you are not dealing with a new problem each time, but with an old pattern reactivated. And this realization allows space to enter. In that space, you find choice. You can choose to breathe deeper. You can choose to not respond yet. You can choose to ask questions instead of making statements. You can choose stillness. To observe without suppressing is a skill that grows with practice. At first, the emotions may seem overwhelming, especially the ones you have avoided for years. But like any practice, the more you do it, the more familiar it becomes. The waves still come, but you learn how to stand in them. You learn that no emotion is permanent, that even the strongest sensations, if watched with awareness, begin to soften, that the mind has the ability to hold difficulty without collapsing. Observation teaches you resilience, not by removing pain, but by showing you that you can meet it without breaking. This way of training the mind also develops presence, because when you observe your emotional state, you are forced into the now. You cannot observe clearly while lost in thought or projection. You must return to what is happening inside you in this moment. And that return is grounding. It is the beginning of calm, not because the emotion vanishes, but because you are no longer running from it. You are facing it directly. In doing so, your fear of it begins to dissolve. You realize that sadness can be sat with, that anger can be studied, that anxiety can be observed. And the more you do this, the more stable you become, not because you no longer feel, but because you feel with clarity. Observation also builds trust within yourself. When you suppress emotion, you create a fracture between the conscious mind and the unconscious self. A part of you is always trying to speak, but it is silenced. Over time, this creates tension, mistrust, and internal fatigue. But when you observe instead of suppress, you are saying to yourself, I am listening, I will not run. That quiet promise, repeated each day, rebuilds your inner alignment. You no longer feel at war with your emotions. You feel guided by them, not ruled, not suppressed, but guided. And this is where emotional intelligence begins, not in controlling what you feel, but in understanding it so deeply that your response becomes wise rather than impulsive. To breathe first and speak later is one of the most practical, yet most overlooked disciplines in emotional control. The breath is a bridge between the body and the mind. It is the one physiological function that happens automatically but can also be controlled consciously. This dual nature makes it a perfect anchor when emotions rise. In moments of tension, frustration, or conflict, the breath is usually the first to change. It becomes short, shallow, or even held entirely. This shift in breathing reflects a deeper shift in your internal state, one that prepares the body for reaction, not reflection. And unless you notice this change, it becomes very easy to speak or act from a place that does not represent who you truly are, but only who you are in that fleeting moment of emotional turbulence. When you consciously direct your breath, you interrupt that automatic response. You create a space where the emotion can be acknowledged without becoming a command. A deep inhale brings oxygen not just to the body, but to the mind. It signals the nervous system that there is no immediate threat, and with that signal comes a softening. Not a disappearance of the emotion, but a pause long enough for clarity to emerge. Most emotional damage in human relationships does not come from feeling something intense. It comes from expressing that feeling without giving it time to settle, without filtering it through awareness. Words spoken in anger, decisions made in panic, silence kept in sorrow. These often become the actions we regret most. Not because the feeling was wrong, but because the timing of our expression was off. To breathe first is to take responsibility for that timing. It is to say, I feel this, but I will not rush to act on it. This requires humility. It requires patience. And it requires the willingness to feel discomfort for a short while, without needing to offload it onto another person immediately. Many people speak as a way to escape their own emotions. They speak to control the situation, to defend themselves, or to blame others. When in truth, what is needed is to stay with the sensation a little longer, to give it space, and to breathe through it. The breath becomes a kind of internal listening, a way of saying to yourself, I am not afraid to feel this. I am present. This practice does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming precise. When you breathe before you speak, you don't lose power. You gain control over how that power is expressed. Just like a sword, the voice must be sharp, but it must also be sheathed until the right moment. Breathing delays the impulse just long enough for wisdom to enter. And when wisdom is present, your words do not cut, they clarify. Your silence is not weakness, it is depth. And your presence carries weight. Not because you dominate the room, but because you are not dominated by your emotions. The breath also reconnects you with the body. Emotions are not only mental, they are deeply physical. A tightening in the gut, a pressure in the chest, a tremble in the voice, these are all signs that something within you is asking for attention. By turning your focus to the breath, you bring your awareness down from the chaotic mind into the grounded body. You become rooted, and from that rootedness, you speak not as a reaction, but as a response. Over time, this discipline of breathing before speaking becomes automatic. It becomes a pause so natural that others notice it. They feel the difference. They feel your words are measured. Your energy is steady and your presence is calming. This does not mean you never express strong emotions. It means when you do, they come with purpose, not confusion. The practice can begin simply. Before responding in a heated conversation, take one deep breath. Before replying to a message that triggers you, take a breath and read it again. Before confronting someone, sit quietly and inhale slowly, exhale even slower. These small pauses create large transformations, because the breath is not just a tool, it is a teacher. It reminds you that control is not about force, it is about awareness. And awareness begins in the space between the inhale and the exhale. In that space, you reclaim your power. Not the power to overpower others, but the power to remain centered, even in chaos. And that kind of power radiates in every word you choose to speak. Understanding emotional triggers is an essential step in mastering emotional control, because what you do not understand will continue to control you. Emotional triggers are those internal buttons that, when pushed, cause a disproportionate emotional reaction. They are often rooted in past experiences, unresolved pain, or deeply ingrained beliefs. For some people, being ignored may trigger intense feelings of rejection. For others, being criticized might awaken shame or anger. The surface event may seem small, but the emotional reaction it creates reveals that something deeper is being touched. If you do not examine your triggers, you will live your life in a constant state of reaction, where other people or situations dictate how you feel and how you respond. To recognize a trigger is to become aware of what happens inside you the moment discomfort arises. It might be a tightening of the jaw, a shift in posture, a quickening of the heart. It might be the sudden appearance of aggressive thoughts or the desire to shut down and withdraw. These reactions are signals. They are not mistakes or weaknesses. They are invitations to investigate. When you begin to see them clearly, you understand that they are not caused entirely by the present moment, but are reflections of past wounds that have not been healed. And healing does not begin with blame or avoidance. It begins with awareness. Most people, when triggered, externalize. They point outward. They say, he made me angry, or she disrespected me, or this situation is unacceptable. While there may be truth in the external event, the emotional reaction belongs to you. The other person may have acted inappropriately, but your emotional response is still your responsibility. This does not mean justifying mistreatment or accepting bad behavior. It means taking back your power by understanding why you respond the way you do. Every trigger is a mirror. It shows you where you are still sensitive, where you still carry pain, and where you still need to grow. By exploring your emotional triggers, you begin to rewrite your relationship with emotion itself. You no longer fear the rising intensity of feeling because you know how to trace it to its root. You become more curious than reactive. You start to ask questions internally. Why did that moment affect me so strongly? What belief was touched? When did I first feel this kind of pain? These questions lead you inward, and the inward journey brings clarity not just about yourself, but also about others. You begin to realize that everyone carries their own set of triggers. You become more compassionate, not out of pity, but out of shared understanding. The real transformation happens when your awareness becomes quicker than your reaction. In the beginning, you might only notice your trigger after you have already acted on it. Later, you might catch it in the middle of the reaction. With practice, you begin to see it before it takes over. And in that moment of seeing, you have a choice. You can follow the old path of automatic reaction, or you can choose a new one, a response born from clarity, not habit. This level of self-awareness builds emotional resilience. Life will continue to present challenges, conflicts, and difficult people. But when you understand your triggers, you are no longer defenseless. You know where you are vulnerable, and you learn to protect those places not by building walls, but by strengthening them from within. You recognize that your emotions are not enemies, they are messengers. And when you listen carefully, you uncover the lessons they carry. Mastery of your triggers does not mean you no longer feel. It means you feel with understanding. It means your emotions still arise, but they no longer hijack your behavior. They no longer dominate your relationships or dictate your choices. Instead, they become part of your deeper intelligence, signals that guide you. This is the essence of self-mastery, not the absence of emotion, but the ability to walk with it in awareness, without losing your center. Emotional maturity is not something that arrives with age or through the mere passage of time. It is a result of intentional effort and conscious development. To practice emotional maturity means to take ownership of your inner world and how it influences the outer one. It is the capacity to feel deeply but not be ruled by those feelings. To understand that emotions are part of your humanity, not enemies to be conquered, nor rulers to be obeyed blindly. A mature emotional state allows for strength and softness to coexist, for you to remain firm in your values without becoming rigid in your opinions. This level of mastery comes not by accident, but through consistent inner work, where you observe not only what you feel, but how those feelings shape your decisions, your speech, and your presence in the world. People often think emotional maturity is about suppression or perfection, never getting angry, never being sad, never feeling afraid. But the mature mind knows that the aim is not to remove emotion, but to refine how it flows through you. Emotional maturity is about expanding the space between stimulus and response, where instead of being pulled by instinct, you act from awareness. This requires patience with yourself, because emotional growth is not a linear path. There will be moments when the old reactions rise again, when you say or do something not aligned with your deeper wisdom, but even these moments become part of your development when you reflect on them with honesty instead of shame. A key part of emotional maturity is accepting that you are always evolving, and that mistakes are not failures, but reminders of where more attention is needed. Another sign of emotional maturity is the ability to carry discomfort without needing to project it onto others. It is easy to blame, to lash out, or to retreat in silence. It is much harder to stay with a feeling long enough to see where it really comes from. A mature person recognizes when a situation has touched a raw nerve and does not rush to make it someone else's fault. Instead, they hold that discomfort with care, knowing that the emotion may be valid, but that the expression of it must still be responsible. This internal discipline creates a kind of emotional weight a groundedness that other people can sense. They begin to trust your words more, because they come not from impulse but from integrity. Emotional maturity also means being able to regulate yourself when others cannot. In moments of conflict, when someone is angry or disrespectful, your ability to remain centered becomes a gift, not just to yourself, but to the situation as a whole. This does not mean allowing others to cross your boundaries. On the contrary, maturity requires you to hold clear boundaries while remaining respectful. It is the ability to say no without aggression, to disagree without hostility, and to stand firm without arrogance. These skills take time to cultivate, but they are essential for anyone who wants to move through the world with strength and dignity. One of the most powerful expressions of emotional maturity is the ability to forgive, not out of weakness or because the pain is forgotten, but because you understand that carrying resentment only poisons your own system. To forgive is not to condone, but to release. It is a decision to not let past pain dictate your present state. This requires a deep emotional intelligence, one that sees the difference between justice and vengeance, between memory and a... When you practice forgiveness, you are not excusing someone else's behavior. You are choosing to prioritize your peace over your pain. And that choice, repeated over time, creates a heart that is free and a mind that is clear. Ultimately, emotional maturity is about alignment. When your thoughts, words, and actions are guided not by your moods but by your values, then you are no longer simply reacting to life. You are responding with intention. This level of self-governance is not dramatic, and it often goes unnoticed, but its effects are deep. It brings stability in relationships, clarity in decisions, and consistency in personal growth. You become someone others can rely on, not because you are always happy or always right, but because you are steady. And in a world full of emotional chaos, that steadiness becomes a rare and powerful form of leadership. It is the quiet strength of someone who knows themselves, manages themselves, and expresses themselves with grace, even when the situation offers every reason not to. Emotional mastery is not the absence of feelings, but the art of understanding, managing, and expressing them with clarity and purpose. When we begin to observe our breath, understand our triggers, create space before reaction, and respond with awareness, we shift from being controlled by emotion to guiding it with wisdom. Practicing emotional maturity is a daily journey, one of reflection, discipline, and patience. In this stillness, in this presence, lies true strength. Not the strength to overpower others, but the strength to remain unmoved by chaos, to choose peace in conflict, and to act from balance rather than impulse. This is the path.